Hello everyone, this is Don again, and I'm going to do a real quick video about some ongoing news that came across uh, online this morning, CNN, and I want to put it in context because last night I was actually working on another video and I kind of felt led to just put that aside for a while and look at the world map. And I was just kind of feeling like looking here at Syria, and as if there were, war arrows being plotted on a strategy board of different elements being drawn in to Syria. And as I sat there and I looked at it, I thought about how, on October 31st, we had the first event, which involved the passenger airline that was shot down, with 224 people killed, and that immediately got Russia hyped up for sending in troops and equipment, and basically took over the fight against ISIS, and it destroyed a lot of their oil transportation and facilities, and so they've been drawn in. And then you've got this event that happened November 13th, just 2 weeks later, with the horrific tragedy in France, Paris, and how that has caused France to start sending in not only ships but their air sorties, and now they're coordinating with Russia to be able to continue to destroy ISIS. Not only them, but Germany and the United Kingdom, and so basically all of NATO has been drawn in. And then unfortunately here in December 2nd in San Bernardino, California, we had that terror event that has brought the American blood boiling, and all the poles switched to sending troops into Syria and to destroy ISIS, the war on terror. As I looked at that, the thought hit me, well, there's one major world player that hadn't been drawn in yet, and that was China. And then I thought, what might be the next event? And I see this in the morning. British U.S. embassies warn of threats against Westerners in Beijing. Okay, let's listen to this.
Now, you see, the thing is here, if the warning is about a specific area or a specific shopping mall.
I want to start that at the beginning. Let's try it again.
Unusual to see this amount of armed officers out on the streets of Beijing, save for times when you might have a high-level political meeting or during a politically sensitive period. But people were warned on social media by Beijing's Public Security Bureau that they would see security officers posted at these malls and supermarkets, and that they would particularly see a concentration of officers at Sanlitun, this popular shopping area. Now, the Security Bureau in Beijing said that this was because it's the Christmas season, that there are heavy crowds out there, lots of entertainment and a lot of shopping, and that was the reason for the heightened or yellow security alert level, as they called it. But they did specifically name Sanlitun, and you have to seize on the fact that Sanlitun is also mentioned by the U.S. and the British embassies, who issued their own warnings today, urging citizens and also government employees to be particularly vigilant after saying they had received information about possible threats against Westerners in that area on or around Christmas. Now, what's the nature of these potential threats? What's the nature of this information? Where is it coming from? The embassies did not specify, neither embassy specified in this case. Both just sent out this warning to their citizens and their government personnel to be particularly vigilant, particularly in Sanlitun, Richard.
So another hype of fear to raise the temperature of the blood for Chinese citizens against the war in Syria to destroy ISIS. So even just the fear of these attacks is definitely going to gain their attention. If we pray nothing happens, then great, but I would definitely keep your eyes open and ears to hear what the next event is, because I do believe that there is an elite globalist group that are setting a stage for World War III. Let's take a listen to a gentleman named Garrison O'Coleman. He's an author and writer, and this is him speaking out about these individuals as he was interviewed shortly after the Paris attacks and how it affected their nation.
Well, let's now talk to political journalist and author Gerard Coleman, who joins us from Paris this evening. Thanks very much for joining us again on RT International. You're in the French capital. What's the mood and atmosphere in the city right now?
We're being told that there's a state of war and a state of emergency. We've had this before. We had this in January, and for several weeks we had non-stop sirens and non-stop chatter on the radio about the threat from radical Islam and terrorist groups and so on. And so we're having a kind of a replay of that, but it has been, I think, accentuated, and we're going to have an intensification of the media campaign, which is essentially a propaganda campaign to make people in France fear Muslims. We need to be clear about the origin of the war on terror. The war on terror is, I quote, orchestrated from abroad. These are the words François Hollande used to describe this terrorist attack. Well, the attacks that have been continuing to destroy Syria, to massacre its population, have also been orchestrated from abroad. They were orchestrated by NATO, and they've been carrying these attacks out against the civilian population of Syria for 4 years now. And this is a terrorist campaign that is also orchestrated from abroad. And people in Europe need to understand that there is a war that is becoming global, that is being waged against civilian populations in particular. It is a form of neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism, which aims to divide and conquer European and Middle Eastern and African and the world's population, for that matter, and to make them submit to a global order that does not serve the interests of most of the people on this planet, but that does serve the interests of a very few ruling elite, a very small, tiny, and particularly tyrannical ruling elite. There is no war on terror. There is a war that is being waged using proxy groups, terrorist proxy groups, and they are being used against nation states who are resisting US and Israeli hegemony, and they are also being used as a means of disciplining the workforces in Europe. In a period of mass unemployment and austerity, you now have terrorist attacks being committed by terrorists funded, armed and trained by Western intelligence agencies. There is no such thing as ISIS. ISIS is a creation of the United States. We know that from official sources of the US military themselves. Declassified documents from the Defense Intelligence Agency have confirmed that. And the French government is now attempting to drum up support for more military intervention in Syria. And what they want to do is they want to get in on the game. The game is almost lost. The Russians have routed much of the Islamic State. You now have Islamic State militants coming into Europe disguised as refugees. That will destabilize Central Europe, and the French government wants to get in on the game in Syria and prop up those so-called moderate rebels. There are no moderate rebels, of course, in Syria. There are Al-Qaeda and ISIS militants, terrorists who have been beheading people, eviscerating people, absolutely creating chaos and genocide right across the region, and this does not serve the Syrian people or anyone other than Western corporate elites and their geopolitical interests.
What do you expect France to do now in the light not only of Friday's terrorism, but 10 months on from Charlie Hebdo? It's not going to ease up on what it's doing, is it?
No. It much depends on how the French public will react. If they will, we are being bombarded now with a media propaganda campaign. It's just non-stop talk where we're told not to go out in the street. We're supposed to be fearful and keep quiet and so on. I think there is going to be a campaign against dissidents in France. They're very worried about the new media that has emerged in recent years, and they are very worried about the alternative media. So I think there you will see, we saw this actually after the attacks in January, you will see a conflation of terrorism and dissidents. So one of the tools which the media the mass media uses to discredit any kind of rational questioning of the established order, and particularly the war on terrorism, is to deride those who would question the war on terrorism as conspiracy theorists. And I think you're going to see a crackdown on so-called conspiracy theorists and websites that actually publish rational and honest analysis of what is happening. So you're going to see more of that type of intellectual terrorism, which is already at boiling point in France. I mean, it's got to the point now where you have professors in universities who are being intimidated. You have school teachers who are basically being fired for even suggesting that there may be a link between French imperialism and terrorism. There was one case recently, for example, of a school teacher who almost lost his job.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Once again, this is just an alert here. Thinking globally about the nations that are being drawn together into the Mideast for a potential World War III is orchestrated by false flag events throughout the world, from the elite globalists that we all know really pull the strings. Okay, this is Don, and we'll talk to you again soon.